Just hours ago, WikiLeaks had a press conference at the Frontline Club, which I believe is in Britain, if I'm not mistaken. And they announced their partners in the media, which I guess include Rolling Stone and a couple other, McClatchy, media outlets, not New York Times and The Guardian, I guess, this time around. And they announced, essentially, this dump of 5 million emails that were stolen, hacked into by Anonymous from the security firm and think tank Stratfor. I've heard many people say that Stratfor is not a terribly relevant organization, and they simply regurgitate other sort of intelligence that they aggregate. Sort of agnostic on that assertion. However, there are a lot of very interesting documents in this dump, not the least of which, and like I say, over the course of the next week and weeks, we will glean more information from this. I mean, you recall the WikiLeaks dump of the State Department cables had implications for months and months and months in terms of news stories, and people are digging through this stuff as we speak. There were more than 4,000 emails apparently in this that mentioned WikiLeaks. The Yes Men have come out with a press release describing the references to the Yes Men. The Yes Men, of course, are those two guys who basically pull corporate pranks. We've spoken to them on this program. One of my favorite was when they came out as representatives of Dow Chemical announcing that they were going to finally provide reparations for the victims of Bhopal. You'll remember that Dow Chemical purchased Union Carbide responsible for a horrible, horrible chemical leak in Bhopal, India. And apparently that was referenced. And according to the Yes Men, many of the Bhopal-related emails addressed from Stratfor to Dow and Union Carbide public relations directors reveal concern that in the lead-up to the 25th anniversary of the Bhopal disaster, Bhopal issue might be expanded into an effective systemic critique of corporate rule. And they speculate at length as to why it hadn't happened yet. In other words, you've got Stratfor saying, nobody seems to be able to connect the dots between corporate malfeasance and this horrible disaster, which killed thousands. Also revealed in these emails, a deal, and you will hear more about this as it goes on, and this is just briefly recapping, because I've yet to really dig into any of these emails. But Stratfor seemed to have essentially created a subsidiary which would get involved in hedge funds and commodities tradings, all based on basically insider information. And they were doing so with a Goldman Sachs managing director who also joined Stratfor's board of directors and invested money. Essentially, as far as I can tell, they created some type of fund which would invest based upon the insider information that they would get from their network of sources inside and out of Goldman Sachs, but mostly, I think, outside of Goldman Sachs. There was also a quote where one of the Stratfor CEO explains to an employee how to exploit an Israeli intelligence informant by using any type of control method, including financial, sexual, or psychological. control. And also exposed in these emails, and again, people have just started to dig into this. Apparently, Coca-Cola was spying on PETA, for the treatment of ethical treatment for animals. And on top of that, they also had an alliance between a number of mainstream journalists, yet unnamed, which essentially, I guess, they would plant stories through or get inside information that was not suitable for print. There was also an email that had them discussing the McCain campaign, which said that, and this is all just trading and rumors and whatnot, but supposedly they have relationships. There are whispers of McCain being set up by the Cheney-Bush crowd because McCain was never liked by either. Some are shocked that he did so well, coupled with serious errors in tactics. Some made no sense. For example, the Hispanics in Florida loved Palin, but his camp would never send her there when easy money was to be had. My guy said Rove and company want to bring in someone they can control next go-round. McCain was not controllable. Jeb Bush's name was being discussed. That didn't happen.
I like some of the things. There's other emails where they go into detail on their opinion on who possible candidates could be. And for Jeb, they say, I would tell Jeb that his time came and went when Katrina went underwater.
Yeah, I think, what these emails are going to show, I think, more than anything else at the end of the day, is just sort of the thinking that goes on. I've always suggested that, when we're talking about government policy, more often than not, we just see the shadows of what's really going on. We see a reflection that is refracted through various lenses. And this simply helps give people a better sense of what their governments are doing, what their journalists are doing around the world, and what the corporations are doing.
But you can't touch them, no, 'cause they're all spies.
So there you go. This is from October 2009. The Obama phone. Snopes. That's fantastic. Telephone service provides a vital link to emergency services, government services, and surrounding communities. Telephone service is considered a necessity for daily modern life, yet the cost of starting and maintaining such service may be too high for some consumers. Under congressional mandate, the Federal Universal Service Fund supports Lifeline assistance and Link Up America programs. So with more people becoming poor, there's more people needed it. It subsidized services to low-income residents and other entities, which provides discounts on monthly service and initial telephone installation or activation fees. These discounts can be up to $10 a month. The program pays 1/2 of the initial installation fee, up to a maximum of $30. You must have an income that is at or below 135% of the federal poverty guidelines. Take part in at least one of the following programs: Medicaid, food stamps. There's Obama giving out food to people. Supplemental security income. Federal public housing assistance, low-income home energy assistance program. National school lunch program. TracFone, through is one of the companies that provides subsidized telephone service to qualifying participants. The Lifeline program is not an Obama program. It was implemented by Congress well before the advent of the Obama administration. And it was implemented in Tennessee in August 2008 and Florida 2008. I am shocked. Wait a second. Hello?
Hello. Sam.
Yeah. Hello?
Hello, it's me, Rupert. How's it going, mate?
Rupert? Rupert Murdoch?
Hi, Rupert Murdoch.
Oh wow! Wow, this is it's sort of impressed that you called. I was literally just about to talk about the hot water you're in.
Well, I want to say unequivocally, I had nothing to do with any bribes, voicemail hacking, or murder.
I'm sorry. Wait a second. You have nothing to do with any bribes, voicemail hacking. Did you say murder?
What?
Did you say you had nothing to do with any murder?
No. I said movies. I had nothing to do with the movies.
Nothing to do with the movies? Well, I don't understand.
No, we won no Oscars for our movies this year. None.
No, I know that. Yeah, but I don't. But okay. So right. So you didn't win any Oscars, but no. The story is you're in big trouble. There's an investigation in Britain. I'm sure you're aware that has shown that it's
I've heard about it. Yeah.
Well, you actually testified in front of one of the committees. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
I did.
Yeah.
I don't remember, Sam. I don't remember it.
Well, let me try and refresh your memory. You testified in front of a parliamentary committee, and you claimed that this bribery. You didn't know anything about the hacking of voicemails. That any bribery took place was just sort of like petty. But now it seems that not only were employees of the News of the World implicated in this, now it seems that there were literally multiple employees at The Sun, which I believe you own, and that wasn't just like buying a cop a pint of beer, but it was literally a culture of corruption where your entities paid off cops, military personnel, other government officials.
Mm-hmm. Sam, let me just say that this is one of the most humble days of my life.
Well,
right
actually, no, I think this is probably the second most humble day.
All right, fine. Second most humble day of my life, fine. But I also want to say one other thing.
All right.
About all the stuff you just said.
Yeah.
James did it.
James
Murdoch, my son, he did it, the little bastard. And I'll tell you something else.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about. Secondly, it is a humble day for me. But James did it. That's what I really want to say.
Okay, you're saying that James did. Now you understand that what you're accusing James of doing probably violated the Foreign Corruptions Act, the U.S. law, saying that if there's a pattern of bribery, if there's significant bribery that is done by a U.S. company, which News Corp is, that this could. I mean, this is stuff that we're talking fines. We could be talking jail here.
Yeah. You lost me. What was the part you wanted me to comment on?
Well, you just said your son did it. I mean,
he did. He did. Everything you're talking about, he did. He should go to jail, not me. I mean, I'm an old man.
Wait a second. I don't think the fact that you're an old man has any bearing on whether or not you should go to jail. If you did it, I mean...
Sure it does, Sam, sure. Look, if I go to prison, I'm an old prune. No one's going to like me, but James is young. He's in shape. He's attractive. He'd probably find someone to live his life with there.
Wait, what are you suggesting, that your son should go to prison because he's young and attractive?
How's it going?
How's it going?
How's it going?
How's it going? I don't know. I'm not. What do you mean? How's it going?
That's what I say when I don't want to talk about something. How's it going?
Well, I'll tell you. You know what else? I mean, you must be very rattled, because I got to tell you, you're starting to sound like Scottish again.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
I'm just saying, you're talking about your son here. Your accent's all over the place, and you must be really rattled. How's it going?
I'm not rattled, Sam. I'm not rattled.
How's it going? What do you mean, how's it going? It seems to be going.
How's it going? That's what I'm asking. How's it going?
Personally, it's going fine.
Fine, whatever. I love the movies. Did you see the movies?
What do you mean, did I see
any
the
Fox
movies?
News Corp movies? Have you seen any News Corp movies lately?
I don't know. I doubt it. I mean, what the movies is got? We're not even talking about the movies.
Right. How's it going then?
It's going good. How is it going? That's what you would. Isn't that what you asked your editor instead of asking about like $1 million payout to what's going? Oh, what's doing? Is that what is it? So now you've switched to how's it going?
What's doing? What's going on? Why the semantics?
You brought it up. You're the one who asked how's it going.
It's, again, I want to say the most humble day of my life right now.
I think you said it was the second most humble day.
Second most humble day. Fine. How's it going?
It's going good, but I got to tell you, Rupee, I don't think you're doing so well.
I'm fine. I'm just an old man, which is why James should go to prison. Everyone should just forget this. We should just move on, look forward.
Yeah.
And also buy the Sunday version of
Oh, yeah. Congratulations on launching.
Well, thank you very much.
The new
I
version.
brainstormed that one on the plane on the way over to London.
Yeah, I know. I bet.
Yeah.
You've just released, you've just published a Sunday version of The Sun, and it seems
Correct.
like all your reporters are quitting or are about to go to jail.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, did you see the copy? Did you see the Sunday? Did you get a copy of the Sunday paper?
No, I live in New York. Why would I read it?
I don't know. It was really good.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate your calling in. That was
Yeah, no problem. Sam, I love the show.
Oh, well.
I love the show.
I'm glad. Maybe you should be able to download it maybe from prison. I'm just
No, we recorded the whole or someone's recorded the whole thing already. I don't know about me, but probably James.
All right, great. Appreciate the call. Call in anytime.
Absolutely. Samuel, bye, mate.
Bile Beak? What did he say?
Bye, mate.
Oh, bye, mate. Well, there's another rich guy for you. Throws his son under the bus.
Come clean and a dream on a busted afternoon and a haze on a busted afternoon and a bad way on a busted afternoon.
We now have scientific proof that the wealthy are more likely to lie, cheat, maybe not steal, but lie and cheat. This according to a new research study by a PhD candidate in psychology at the University of California. They did a couple of studies, according to Bloomberg News, of how the upper class tend to behave in certain circumstances. In one test, a candy test, 129 undergraduates were manipulated to view themselves as either wealthy or poor. Then they were presented with a jar of individually wrapped candy. Now, I want to just say at this point, it's actually not wrong to take candy from babies because babies should not be eating candy. They don't have teeth a lot of times. Small pieces of candy they can choke on. That's actually a good altruistic, if not also self-benefiting, I guess, initiative. So they were presented with a jar of individually wrapped candy, which researchers said would go to children in a nearby lab, though they could take some if they wanted. And the children would just get less. The undergraduates believing themselves to be upper income took more than those believing themselves to be low income, the study found. And it wasn't just a candy experiment. Now, they used to say the upper class, as defined by the study, were more likely to break the law while driving, more likely to take candy from children. They were more likely to lie in negotiations, cheat to raise their odds to winning a prize, and endorse unethical behavior at work. The researchers say it's important to teach people ethics. It's not that the rich are innately bad, but as you rise in the ranks, I guess, of income, whether as a person or a non-human primate, you become more self-focused. So the wealthy should feel comforted that they share these attributes with their ape cousins as well. Now, previous research has shown that students in economic classes are more likely to describe greed as a good thing. And so there is a sense that this is not only self-selective in some respects, but also the wealthier you become, the more insulated and essentially inward-looking you become. One experiment invited 195 adults recruited using Craigslist to play a game in which a computer rolled dice for a chance to win a $50 gift certificate. The numbers each participant rolled were the same, so the game was rigged. But anyone self-reporting a total higher than 12 was lying about their score. Those in the wealthier groups were found to be more likely to lie about their score. The theory that, one of the theories that this researcher has is that those who are less wealthy tend to cheat less because they're more reliant on their community to get by and therefore feel more constrained by community norms. Does that sound familiar to you? Is there any reason? Is there any question as to why Mitt Romney is doing better among voters who earn more than $200,000 a year now? And this dude is like talking about people wearing ponchos going, nice jacket. There were traffic tests, and about 1/3 of drivers in higher status cars cut off other drivers at an intersection watched by the research, about double those in less costly cars. And additionally, almost half of the more expensive cars didn't yield to pedestrians who entered the crosswalk.
What kind of car do you got?
I've got a Bitchin Camaro.
Bitchin Camaro, I ran over my neighbors. Bitchin Camaro, now I'm in all the papers. My folks bought me a Bitchin Camaro with no insurance to match. So if I happen to run you down, please don't leave a scratch. I ran over some old lady one night at the county fair, and I didn't get arrested because my dad's a mayor. Bitchin Camaro.
Wow. Well, let's dig into what is facing Rupert Murdoch. I mean, there was apparently new testimony, or I should say a public testimony by the lead prosecutor, or I should say investigator, Deputy Assistant Commissioner Sue Akers, who is leading the investigation known as I think it's the Levinson investigation in Britain. And these allegations are that the Sun, the Daily Sun, owned by Rupert Murdoch and News Corp, systematically paid bribes to, quote, a network of corrupted officials in the British police, in the British military, and in government agencies. Akers said that Murdoch had illegally paid unidentified officials hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for news tips, or I should say the Sun, paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for news tips and, quote, salacious gossip. Said the payments had been authorized, and this is what is problematic for News Corp, at a very senior level within the newspaper. Now, this is the second newspaper now that has faced these allegations. And she said, Akers speaking, there appears to have been a culture at the Sun of illegal payments, and systems have been created to facilitate such payments whilst hiding the identity of the officials receiving money. This is very important because if there's a cover-up, there's an indication that people were aware that it was going on. This is the Levinson inquiry. Simultaneously, a lawyer for the Levinson inquiry said that Rebecca Brooks, who was the former Murdoch executive in charge of overseeing the news of the world, was apparently informed by police in 2006 that detectives had evidence of the voicemail hacking. This is also contrary to what she has testified as late as 2010. So you now have two newspapers implicated. You have a across-the-board evidence of cover-ups, that it was not rogue employees that were doing this. When you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments, this doesn't just happen because one reporter's just like, oh, I must have had too much lunch that day. They don't just come back and use bad British accents to claim that they've overset. In fact, Akers said the cases we are investigating are not ones involving the odd drink or meal to police officers or other public officials. Instead, these are cases in which arrests have been made involving the delivery of regular, frequent, and sometimes significant sums of money to small numbers of public officials by journalists. Emails show that one Sun journalist received more than $235,000 in cash over several years to pay his sources, a number of whom were public officials. She also said that there were emails showing that reporters and officials at the newspaper were afraid of losing their job or getting in trouble with the law because of this stuff. And then on Monday, apparently, there were other testimony in which a former high-ranking police officer said that News International, this is the owners of News of the World, owned a subsidiary of News Corp, had deliberately obstructed police investigations into the phone hacking. And today, there is the latest revelation from the Levinson inquiry that one of their conduits for information, this is one of the news world's main sources, and you can say source or you can say conduits or sources, conduits for information from serving police officers, potentially in return for legal cash payments. In other words, people that they've been basically bribing for information, was a private investigator named Jonathan Rees. This was a guy who was investigated and tried for the murder of his business partner. This trial apparently collapsed and fell apart because of the Metropolitan Police Department's poor handling of evidence. And this evidence dealt with the revelation of these corrupted police officers. And during this investigation into this murder, News of the World apparently provided surveillance resources to the private investigator and harassed detectives on the case who were chasing after this private investigator. So now what you have is they're not only protecting the guy who was paying off the cops, they're protecting him from a separate murder investigation that he was involved with. So I can understand why Rupert is floating the idea that maybe James should go to prison, at least on this program. Rupert Murdoch is floating this stuff because they're in big trouble, and this is not going to end in Britain. Because this was a culture of corruption, if they are found to be paying off public officials, not just from one entity in an isolated instance, but from two separate entities owned by the company, it is very likely that News Corp is going to be subject to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Guardian UK quotes Mark McDougall, partner from a Washington office of the law firm Aiken Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Feld, and a former federal prosecutor. This is obviously a very significant development with regards to the likelihood of a U.S. prosecution. If the British authorities are articulating a pattern, a defined scheme to bribe officials, that's a very big deal. Mike Kohler, professor of business law at Butler University. Last July, when we first started talking about this, there was one newspaper, the News of the World, in one category of foreign official, the police. Now we have another newspaper in a much broader category of foreign officials. The evidence seems to suggest there was a recognition that these payments may have been illegal. This is in reference to the emails that the investigator Akers was talking about. And the notion that there were attempts to disguise the nature of these payments. These elements would fall under the jurisdiction of the Foreign Corruption Practices Act. Tom Fox, a Houston-based lawyer who specializes in these cases. Speaking of a culture of corruption is really bad, said Fox. No pun intended. There are two main types of SCPA case. In the first, a company has policies in place but fails to detect corruption. The second is far worse, and that's when there is a program in place and you ignore it. So, if I was at Fox and Friends right now, I'd be wondering who my new boss is going to be.
To the new Constitution, make a fire for the new revolution. Sonic green, the change all around. Pick up my guitar and play, just like yesterday. Then I'll get on my knees and pray. We don't get fooled again.
All right, folks, we are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program as he traverses apparently a snowstorm on Route 87. He should be able to handle that. I mean, the guy's been to Iraq and Afghanistan reporting. 87 is a fairly straight road, so I think we're safe. Michael, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, as long as the state police don't mind that I'm probably violating some sort of law about talking on a cell phone while driving, but we won't tell them about it.
All right. Well, let's assume that you're talking on a headpiece and
hands-free.
Hands-free.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good. In which case, I'm no longer. I'm not aiding and abetting anything. So, all right, listen. There's a couple of stories I want to talk about, and I'm sorry that last time you were on the program we had such technical difficulties. But there was so there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about, but I want to start with the piece that you posted last night on Rolling Stone on RollingStone.com, a blog post emanating out of this email dump by from an allegedly anonymous hacking Stratfor, and then WikiLeaks releasing these emails. One was about the Department of Homeland Security essentially monitoring Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, that's correct. So WikiLeaks obtained about 5 million emails from the private security company called Stratfor. And the WikiLeaks isn't saying where they got it from. That's their usual policy. The activist group Anonymous has taken credit for giving it to them, but we don't really know. And to me, I've been searching through the emails the past couple days, and this was the biggest news really I stumbled upon first. And essentially, Stratfor had been given a document, a report that Homeland Security had put together, kind of examining the roots of Occupy Wall Street, of a warning that it could become a threat to the country, essentially, and in quite vivid detail. They did things like checking, who's using Twitter, what sort of social media usage is being going on, what local law enforcement should look for, the impact that the protests had been having. So it's pretty significant from my point of view, even though some might say the report is benign. The fact that you have, a federal law enforcement agency that is putting together reports on peaceful protest movements, I think is somewhat disturbing.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things about this that I find really strange. I'm holding it now. It's like a 5-page PDF. It is from Homeland Security, the National Protection and Programs Directorate, Office of Infrastructure Protection. And, just first off, what would the reaction be if we find a 5-page PDF, color glossy report on the Tea Party? I mean, it's impossible to imagine. But
it would be sirens on the Drudge Report for sure.
Oh, and it would be the number one story. I mean, we remember the backlash from just when the Department of Homeland Security said we got to be careful about right-wing nationalistic organizations that prove to be apocryphal in some instances. But there's a couple of aspects of this that I want to ask you about. One is I don't understand what is Stratfor and what is their relationship to Homeland Security, because there's been a lot of talk, and I've heard people reference Stratfor for a long time as being this sort of just these BS artists, and which is fine, but they seem to make a lot of money off this to people who take them very seriously, who essentially, one could argue, run our society.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? Stratfor bills itself as a sort of private CIA, a leading global intelligence firm that corporations can hire, up to paying them fees up to, $40,000 a pop or more for the kind of consulting that they do. Now, it's interesting. A lot of people have said, "Oh, Stratfor is a joke. It's not a big deal." But I mean, as you said, people take them very seriously. The ranks are populated with, fairly well-respected analysts and former government intelligence agents. So if Stratfor is a joke, then one would possibly say that, well, most of our intelligence gathering is a joke. But yeah, I mean, in this case, what were they doing with the Department of Homeland Security? So they also were monitoring the Occupy Wall Street protest. I haven't published these emails. I don't know if WikiLeaks has yet, but there's a lot of email traffic, thousands of emails about Occupy Wall Street going back and forth within this organization. And the reason why they were so keen to see what was going on, because they would then, whatever intel they could gather through whatever methods, either public or in this case, from Department of Homeland Security, they could then sell to their clients, specifically their clients in the financial service sector. And there's a lot of warnings in these emails about how these protests are affecting financial services.
Yeah, so that's nice that we are essentially subsidizing the information gathering of a private firm that is selling this stuff to corporations. I wonder when we get our kickback here. But
right.
Well, the other thing I find strange about this is that at the end of the report, it says the report is posted regularly to the Homeland Security Information Network Critical Sectors portal. This is if you get an email blast from anybody, you see down at the bottom, it's constant contact or whatever. This has sort of a similar thing. And it says, if you'd like to become an HSIN.CS member, please contact HSINCS@hg.dhs.gov. Can we sign up? I mean, will we get reports like this?
I haven't tried. It's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised that, because it's not a classified report, but I had never seen it published anywhere. I looked around to see if it had been published. and I couldn't find it. So I'm not sure. I mean, people might come back and say exactly like, oh, well, this is publicly available. There's no big secret here. Regardless of whether we can get it or not, I would think it would be. My guess would be if I tried to sign up for Homeland Security's reports about, their warnings about, threats to critical, public infrastructure, they wouldn't necessarily be too keen to send me them. But I haven't tried yet.
All right. Well, we're going to try as soon as we get off our program today. But I want to also flag just a couple of things that you flagged in your piece at Rolling Stone. They say the continued expansion of these protests also places an increasingly heavy burden on law enforcement and movement organizers to control protesters. And then it goes on to say, due to the location of the protests in major metropolitan areas, heightened and continuous situational awareness for security personnel across all CI sectors is encouraged. Critical infrastructure. Who are they speaking to here? In other words, they're calling for a heightened and continued situational awareness. What is that, A? And B, who are they calling for to do this?
I think local law enforcement companies, and I would assume energy companies, transportation companies, one could assume even airlines, ports, these sorts of things. I mean, the question is, who in this Occupy Wall Street movement do they really view as a threat? And the people they list, Anonymous, the activist group, but they also list, not necessarily in the same context, but quite similar, unions, protesters, activists. The question, it raises a lot of questions, and people, and I'm sure one could say this is just benign. Well, what do you think, Department of Homeland Security? Shouldn't they be monitoring large-scale public protests? I don't know. I mean, look, if the Egyptian government was putting out reports about, we got to watch for these guys in Tahrir Square, we would be up in arms and say, oh my God, what is the security force doing to these protesters? They're infringing on their rights. But in this case, I guess the regime apologists in Washington are just going to say, oh, it's no big deal.
Well, it seems to me that if they're basically inviting people to get on an email list, well, we send you reports like this, I mean, it would be pretty naive to assume this is all they have, right? I mean, isn't there probably a version of this that maybe even Stratfor wouldn't have access to? I mean, I find it hard to believe that they're putting out this glossy PDF for semi-public dissemination, and they don't have another more secretive dossier, or maybe that we're not getting other intelligence agencies aren't looking into this.
Well, that's the disturbing thing. This is certainly the vanilla for public consumption version of the report, right? We know from prior reports that there'd been indications that the Department of Homeland Security had helped coordinate the nationwide crackdown last fall on Occupy Wall Street with law enforcement. And then you see a report like this, and it does really make you wonder. Now, also in the context of the Stratfor emails that I've been looking through, which I think is worth pointing out, they discuss a New York Police Department counterterrorism report about Occupy Wall Street as well. And now I wasn't able to obtain that, but Stratfor had it apparently. So they have this counterterrorism report about Occupy Wall Street from the NYPD, and they have a Department of Homeland Security report about Occupy Wall Street. And the question is, is this I can understand why if you're a big bank you'd want this information. The question is it the government's role to be providing this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's pretty shocking. And I think at the very least what we have is insight, regardless of what one thinks the competence or the seriousness one should treat Stratfor with. The fact of the matter is that we have insight into at least what the institutional thinking is by these large corporations, because we're seeing one of the major services they pay for to develop their institutional thinking when they look upon what's going on within society.
Exactly. I think, and as you suggested too, my hunch would be, just from covering these things and just knowing how these sort of large kind of law enforcement agencies work, is that we're just seeing the surface. Remember, this is just a report from, as you said, the Critical Infrastructure Department or whatever it was. Who knows what else is out there on Occupy Wall Street. And I've said this before, but I think it's worth pointing out. Does Homeland Security have a report on the Democratic National Committee's conventions? Do they have it on the watch the RNC delegates as they come to town with the Tea Party? So there's all these other political movements. What if it was a civil rights movement? People would be, and we know that in the FBI in the 60s, that's what the government spent their time doing, compiling dossiers on Martin Luther King and these peaceful activists. And to see those sort of patterns of behavior, again, with just this DHS report, we don't know the extent of it, but we get a sense of it. It's very disturbing. And you combine that with the NYPD spying scandal. We know they're spying on a bunch of innocent Muslims from Yale to elementary schools in New Jersey. I think it's a wake-up call from what's been going on this past 10 years.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to point out about this PDF report is it's dated October 2011, as if this is sort of a regular, Volume 1, Issue 3 type of situation. I wonder, has anybody asked Department of Homeland Security if there is a December 2011, if there's a January 2012 version, if there's a February 2012 version?
I have not yet. We were under pretty intense deadline pressure. I literally, I'd put this up as soon as I could do it in a diligent way. But this is sort of the beauty. WikiLeaks gets hammered all the time. But in a way, this is sort of the beauty of WikiLeaks and this sort of reporting and the partnership that Rolling Stone and McClatchy have engaged in this case, but pretty limited, but still significant. In that, this hopefully will open up lines of questioning that otherwise would not have been there. Right. This is just one, glimpse of what's clearly a story that could have massive proportions. If people started really digging in to see well, wait a second, exactly as you said, is this Volume 1? What does Volume 2 look like? What happens? What's the volume in November once you have, things going down in Oakland like they did in other places where there actually was violence? What's the level of monitoring that's going on of peaceful activists? What's the level of monitoring going on that activists who may be, the black bloc guys, the anarchists? What sort of files are being produced on them?
Right. I think people have to, at this point, just contemplate for a moment that if Department of Homeland Security is disengaged in October 2011, the idea that they would just say, okay, we've written our 5-page report, I'm done, that whoever is involved in doing this investigation just rolled it up and said, okay, we've done our job. It's beyond naive to assume that. And I just want to turn for a moment. I know you're driving, but I know that's also a long, boring road. So a couple of weeks ago, you had a piece up about a Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who was a 17-year Army veteran. He submitted a report, I guess 2 reports, one of which you got a hold of at Rolling Stone, and then just tell us about that report. Tell us why that report was so damning.
Well, this was so Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, an active duty Army officer, had compiled 2 reports: a unclassified report that he submitted to Congress and to the Pentagon to release publicly, and a classified version of the report. The unclassified version of the report, which essentially said the senior military leadership had been engaged in a pattern of deception of the American public, and laid it out in pretty stark detail about what that meant and how they've been doing that over the years in Afghanistan. The Pentagon didn't want to release the report. I ended up getting a copy of it. We posted it up online, and again, it's a devastating indictment of the war in Afghanistan. And what's most amazing about it is that no one really disagreed with it. There was not much pushback, at least in terms of the substance of the report. We saw pushback in terms of a campaign against the whistleblower, Colonel Davis. But again, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with some of the issues that will be in the report. The total lack of success with the Afghan army after we spend $11.6 billion a year, and it's still totally infiltrated by the Taliban, drug use, completely incompetent. We have statement after statement from senior military officials that it's clearly they're lying. I mean, and this is the amazing thing about this report. It's not so much what it says, though that's important. It's the fact that a 17-year Army vet who's done 4 tours, who's active duty, working at the Pentagon, decided that it was such a moral imperative that he had to come out and sort of set the record straight.
Can any lieutenant colonel write a report like this? I mean, under what auspices does he file a report like this?
The report was filed as his own kind of, I guess you could call this freelance, kind of just freelancing to let Congress know to what he was feeling, doing his moral obligation as an officer of the United States Army, that he felt he had a moral obligation to expose or to point out what he felt were things that were not being told straight to the American public. So it was sort of a freelance thing, but he got clearance to do it in terms of he went through all the right procedures in terms of handling the classified information, going to the Congress first, and also submitting it to the Pentagon first. So this did not catch them by surprise. He went through all the proper channels to do it, and it just shows that no one is being fooled anymore by this stuff, and no one even really the fact that no one bothered to kind of even try to defend it, and they instead just tried to attack Colonel Davis's credibility. It tells you quite a lot about the argument for staying in Afghanistan.
Am I wrong in my sense that this got very little coverage? I mean, it's almost there's the same sort of feeling, I guess. I see this response now across couple of different stories, including the WikiLeaks and Stratfor story. This sort of cynicism of, I saw people online talking about, or on Twitter, some journalists saying, this Stratfor leak is like the cables leak. It's stuff that everybody already knew and didn't really care about. And I just wonder, do reporters realize that even though they know about this stuff and they don't think it's worthy of disseminating to the American public, that the vast majority of Americans have no idea about this stuff?
Yeah, I am stunned by the out-of-hand dismissal of yet again of WikiLeaks, right? There's a lot of things you can criticize about WikiLeaks, but you have to admit that they have been involved in some of the most significant scoops and stories of the past 20, 30 years in journalism. I mean, look at the impact of cables. I mean, there's been over 100,000 stories around the world that have derived from the WikiLeaks cables.
I'll tell you something. I go on cable TV every week, and I would say in 2011, nearly 50% or more of the times I went on those shows referenced information that came from those cables, and very often not even referencing that they came from WikiLeaks. I mean, it became the basis of literally tens of stories that just doing 15 minutes a week on these cable stations were talking about. It almost as if it went from this is not relevant to this is information that is just out there that we don't even realize came from WikiLeaks.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, part of the knee-jerk establishment reaction to WikiLeaks is just that. It's they view it as a threat, and the sort of DNA to try to dismiss the threat is to pretend it's not a big deal. As they pretend it's not a big deal, Assange is under an investigation and possible U.S. indictment. Bradley Manning has been in jail for over a year, and they go out of their way to just kind of contemptuously to speak about WikiLeaks and Assange and Stratfor in the most contemptuous terms. I mean, I think there's something so perverse about that. What journalist in his right mind is going to say, oh, yeah, I don't want to look at 5 million emails from one of the world's leading private intelligence firms, even if they are a joke, I mean, it just, to me, is so shocking. And I've just scratched the surface over a couple-day period looking into these things, and I've had 2 stories out of it. And in both stories, there's been terrific response from the public, and there was terrific response from the Colonel Davis story, at least in terms of Rolling Stone and web traffic and things. You know, the Colonel Davis report also got a huge response. And how was that treated by the elite media in the Beltway? I'm sounding like Rick Santorum here, but it was dismissed. You know, it was completely dismissed. Oh, this guy is not to be taken seriously. And I just think they're really, really missing the boat. And God bless them. A lot of them do great work, but I think they're just missing the boat on this whole story.
Well,
multiple stories. Yeah.
I have two responses to that. One, you can thank them for the web traffic that you're getting because you have less competition. And two, you just got to get going to more parties, buddy. You're just staying at home too much. That's your problem.
I know. I'm not hanging out with the right people, apparently.
All right. Well, Michael Hastings, thanks so much for joining us. Please drive carefully. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
When I'm riding in my car and a man comes on the radio, he's telling me more and more about some useless information supposed to fire my imagination. I can't get no. Hey, that's what I say. I can't get no.
We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. On the phone, Jeff Smith from, writer for the Daily Beast and also a member of the media team down at Occupy Wall Street. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Give us an update on what took place yesterday in, at least in New York City. There were actions across the country yesterday. Tell us what happened in New York.
Well, the focus of what was going on was about, it was called Shut Down the Corporations, and it was actually a call that came out of Portland, and there were a number of cities all over the country that were all focused around specifically the corporations that have been involved in ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which I know you've covered and have done a lot of work on. And so it was particularly the, biggest and most sinister corporations that are basically using our government as a proxy to pass their own laws and basically use as their own corporate infrastructure. And so we met at Bryant Park, and from there actions were staged targeting these specific institutions such as Bank of America and Pfizer, and in other cities around the country, tobacco companies were targeted, and, large industrial or rather agricultural conglomerates, things like that. But basically, it was just another in a long series of attempts to call attention to really serious issues in this country that the regular, not surprisingly, corporatized media is not really that interested in covering. And so in addition to the marches and actually trying to protest in front of some of these companies, we also had Matt Taibbi out at Bryant Park, and he gave a little impromptu teach-in and talked about some of the issues. So there's both actions as well as education there. And as far as what actually happened in New York, it turned into another scenario where the police basically preempted virtually everything we tried to do. So in instances where we tried to get in front of Bank of America just to perform some street theater and to make a point about what's going on, they preemptively had the entire block barricaded from every side, and the police were out in huge numbers, and they even made some just sort of random arrests. They grabbed, one person was dressed as a clown as part of this street theater, and they just arrested and, hauled away a clown. So, it's definitely about intimidation here in New York, but I think certainly that the protest is undeterred, and these are the types of things that we're going to continue to talk about and continue to take to the streets.
What are the charges for dressing like a clown in New York? Is that a jesting without license, or what is the official charge?
I'm not sure. They can pretty much call anything disorderly conduct, but no, I'm not really sure. I mean, clearly the Fox studios would be overrun by NYPD if acting like a clown were clearly illegal in this city.
Nice.